The father's words always echoed in Cheyenne's mind. Live for your home. That meant nothing more than suppressing desire and living forever in the shadow of his elder brother. He collapsed to the ground, surrounded by soldiers who muttered in disbelief that a single man could stand against so many knights. From the crowd, a long-haired figure remarked that it was only natural, given he was the brother of that man. Cheyenne bled. The one facing him was Boris, lips curled in a twisted grin. Cheyenne demanded to know who had sent him, daggers clenched, suspecting the Emperor himself. As he unleashed his power, Boris sneered at the rising mist, calling it filthy. To him, Cheyenne was nothing but an assassin from the Mist group, tainted by heresy, and therefore marked for elimination. Cheyenne warned him to try surviving the encounter, but Boris calmly revealed that a 9-star barrier already sealed the place. Urgency surged in Cheyenne. He needed to escape, uncover the truth of the incident involving his brother. He vowed to tear through any barrier Boris had raised. Then, a voice cut through the tension. "Enough, Cheyenne!" The sudden interruption stunned him, and his father's old words returned. Live only for the home. Live for your brother. Eshel was the house. Its success was his success. The realization hit like a blade. The one orchestrating everything was none other than his own brother. Cheyenne dropped to his knees. Eshel stepped forward, noting that Cheyenne must be wondering why. He praised him for serving faithfully until now, but claimed that for the sake of the house, and for his own brother, he would free him from his sins. Cheyenne's mind spun. What sin? Eshel's eyes narrowed at the mist surrounding him, calling it vile, insisting Cheyenne had long since ceased to be human. He accused him of deceiving everyone. Cheyenne struggled with the words. None of it made sense. He had fought through the struggles of the Empire's throne, endured the Demon King's army, bled through the Unification War. He had helped his brother achieve it all. His fist slammed into the ground. His entire life had been given to that man. 20 years of toil, cast aside as if nothing. Defiance surged. Even if his body broke, he would give everything now. Soldiers gawked at the impossible mana still flooding from him. Transformed, he spat out his verdict. His brother was shameful, the so-called hero who turned his blade against family. Eshel's gaze hardened, and Cheyenne lunged. He pushed forward, declaring that a single strike was all he needed. He seized the opening and drove his attack forward, only for it to crash against an invisible wall. The duel was never fair. Boris stood guarding Eshel, shielding him with the barrier. The chances taken to drive a blade straight into Cheyenne's stomach. Steel buried in his flesh, the attacker admits he had considered letting him slip away. But in the end, Cheyenne revealed nothing but darkness. It was almost a relief. Never once had there been any trust. The sword was torn free, a sharp kick sent Cheyenne sprawling, and the group departed without hesitation. Lying there, Cheyenne thought of how absurd this ending was. Dying like this made no sense at all. Yet in the next breath, he lunged at Eshel once more, dagger aimed at his neck with the intent to kill. But a burst of blinding light tore through his body. A voice called out for the young master. A boy jolted awake, drenched in sweat, tangled in his sheets. The maid at his side asked how much longer he intended to sleep. He muttered Emily's name. Stunned. Looking at her, he realized it had been 2 decades since their first meeting. Yet she appeared unchanged, exactly as she had on that day. The room around him was familiar too, the same chamber he had once lived in as a child. The truth hit him hard. He had returned to his youth. Emily scolded him to quit ruining the bed and get ready for training. Cheyenne blinked, unsure what training she was talking about. But everything around him screamed of the past, the Vert family duchy. Perhaps this was memory, but the details were sharp, clear. It was March 1st, 27 years earlier, 1 year before he would enter the academy. At the start of every month, an open training duel was held before the public. It was a major event, one his father valued. His opponent that day was Krantz Vert, a half-brother born of the Duke's official wife, Marguerite. They were the same age, but Krantz always drew more favor, while Cheyenne, the illegitimate son, was left in shame. That was the day his father told him to hold back and surrender. Emily urged him to give up, but Cheyenne's answer now was different. He would just finish it quickly. Then hesitation struck. The thin sword in his hand felt impossibly heavy in this body. This was no dream, no memory replayed, and yet he knew no magic capable of this. Had he truly gone back? Krantz sneered, impressed he hadn't run away. Cheyenne's father signaled for them to begin. The brother rushed forward. Certain victory was his, asking what Cheyenne was staring at. But Cheyenne only wondered why his brother's movements were so slow. A single step to the side let the strike cut nothing but air. Krantz cursed him as a coward and swung again, only to yelp when a sharp blow struck his hand, forcing him to drop the blade. Pain doubled as a kick smashed his shin, sending him down crying on the ground. The mother called out to the boy while the father watched with a spark of interest. Cheyenne, seeing his opponent sprawled on the ground, knew that pressing the blade to his neck would finish everything. Yet memories of the past surfaced. This same boy had tormented him without mercy, and the harassment had continued even after entering the academy. Now, in this second chance at life, he felt the need to end it here, to make sure such cruelty never rose again. From this moment forward, he would live only for himself. The duel ended with Krantz utterly crushed. The Duke delayed his original plans, insisting he needed to speak with Cheyenne, even assigning one of his knights to watch over him closely. In the corridor, Cheyenne crossed paths with Krantz's mother, clearly returning from the infirmary. A sly grin crossed his face as he asked if her son was fine. The Duchess glared back, calling him shameless for daring to speak after what he had done to his own brother. He dismissed her outrage, saying this was nothing unusual in training bouts. Her expression hardened as she spat venom, claiming this was why one should never bother with illegitimate children. Filthy mother, filthy son, both better suited to collecting garbage in the streets. Cheyenne stopped in his tracks. She had crossed the line. A thought flickered. Should he kill her here? But the idea dissolved into a grin as he remembered he had other ways to make her suffer slowly. He declared that he would join the same academy as Krantz. The Duchess demanded to know what he meant. Cheyenne pressed further, accusing her of not caring about her son's graduation. Her brows furrowed, and she raised her hand to strike him, but the knight stepped forward, shielding Cheyenne and apologizing to her. The Duke's voice cut through, summoning the boys, leaving no space for further quarrel. Cheyenne fixed his gaze on the Duchess before turning to leave, knowing well that his father's orders were absolute, and the knight's presence was there to protect him under those orders. Inside the chamber, his father instructed him to enter. Cheyenne stepped forward, introduced himself, and took a seat. It struck him that the last time he had spoken with this man in such a way had been 15 years ago. Duke Wallace Vert, the man revered as the continent's protector. With magic and brilliant strategies, he had once halted the demon armies in their tracks. Even if an entire force under the Demon King had come to slay him, they would have failed. His wish had always been peace for the land. At least that was how Cheyenne remembered him. An admirable figure who gave his life to the people. The Duke's first words broke the silence. He remarked that he had noticed something. Cheyenne had seen the sword's line of attack and dodged. Cheyenne faltered at the observation. Wallace clarified. When Krantz struck, Cheyenne had easily followed the blade's path and shifted aside. He wanted to know where this fencing skill had been learned. Cheyenne was taken aback by how sharply the man noticed details. He claimed to have learned on his own. Wallace, unconvinced, stated that as far as he knew, Cheyenne had never shown interest in fencing, perhaps hiding his talent deliberately. The boy explained that he simply hadn't wanted to draw attention. Wallace leaned back, remarking how remarkable it was that Krantz had been defeated despite such restraint. He stopped for a moment, then asked why Cheyenne had struck his brother in that way at the end. Cheyenne wondered if this was recognition, if his father was finally seeing him as someone strong. He replied that he only wanted to prove something. Wallace pressed further, asking what exactly he meant to prove. Cheyenne's answer was direct. He wanted to show that he was Krantz's brother, and that he was the better one. The Duke broke into laughter, saying it was rare to hear such a blunt, straightforward response. He hoped that someday Cheyenne would become a powerful ally to Eshel. The name alone made Cheyenne tense, his mind spinning with disbelief. Why would he ever want to side with that man? It was clear his father's fixation with Eshel hadn't changed at all. Cheyenne clenched his fists, holding back any words. Wallace continued, explaining that there would be no reward ceremony, but Cheyenne could still make a request. Cheyenne's intentions were clear. His only goal now was to destroy whatever Eshel aimed to achieve. So he asked for something specific. The maid was startled, repeating his request, asking if he truly wanted to go to the war front. He confirmed it without hesitation. She stared at him as if he had lost his mind, reminding him he had no idea how terrifying that place was. Demons, monsters, and nameless horrors everywhere. The western edge of the old empire was known as the continent's front line, a battlefield where the war against the demon army had dragged on for 100 years without pause. Because of this, Wallace hesitated but finally laid down a condition. Cheyenne would have to be qualified to go. What that qualification meant, Cheyenne wasn't entirely sure. But one fact was certain. He had to become stronger, faster, as quickly as possible. He still carried all the combat knowledge he'd gained before regression, and within him pulsed a faint trace of demonic power. All he needed was relentless training, and eventually he could wield it. The door burst open then, a loud voice calling his name. With one hand on her hip, his elder sister finally appeared. Ellis. She seized him by the collar as the maid asked where she had been. Ellis ignored the question, glaring at Cheyenne and asking if he was out of his mind. She had already heard he had requested to be sent to the front line, while Cheyenne pleaded with her to let him go. She dropped him flat onto the ground, calling him arrogant for thinking that defeating Krantz made him special. Then she shouted in his face, demanding he meet her on the roof immediately. Outside the castle, on a stone bridge, the two faced each other. Ellis explained the conditions. The fight would begin the moment he touched his sword, and if he could withstand her for 3 minutes, she would allow him to go to the front line. Cheyenne questioned why they had to go that far, but Ellis ignored him, tossing her own question instead. She asked if he was aiming to inherit the family. The bluntness caught him completely off guard, but his answer was simple. He had no interest in that. Before he could even reply, Ellis ordered him to draw his sword. Cheyenne thought bitterly that he had barely regressed and was already being forced into a second fight. The moment his hand touched the blade, Ellis lunged, leaving him startled without knowing why. He managed to block her strike, and disbelief flashed across her face. How could he have stopped that? Cheyenne himself was shaken. She was truly coming at him with full strength, against a brother 7 years younger. She retreated with sharp precision, still trying to grasp how her heavy sword had been stopped by his thin rapier. Cheyenne ground his teeth, convinced it was only luck. Ellis admitted to herself that he was stronger than she had expected, but Cheyenne knew he was in trouble. Ellis pressed forward with a relentless chain of cuts, each one forcing him to the limit to avoid them. Then she leapt, preparing a crushing vertical slash. Cheyenne parried at his shoulder's edge, her blade sliding past and darting dangerously close to her neck. The sight startled her, and Cheyenne realized he had made a grave mistake. With a twist of his arm, he redirected the strike, and both stepped back. Standing on the pillar, he understood the risk. Had he not moved his sword, he would have killed her. All the assassination techniques he had learned were designed for instant death. He didn't know how to fight without aiming to kill. But Ellis had no intention of stopping. She wanted this match to last 3 full minutes. For her, it would be dangerous. Cheyenne considered channeling mana into his blade, but his energy was already thinning. Then Ellis began chanting, calling the earth and wind to merge with her sword. Cheyenne recognized it at once, 6-star magic. Her blade shimmered as water energy wrapped around it. Tears welled in his eyes. She truly intended to kill him. This was no test. Ellis repeated to herself that she could not lose no matter what. Cornered against the wall, Cheyenne realized that reflecting her attack would either kill her or hurl her from the bridge. With no choice, he leapt forward. She raised her weapon, releasing a beam of light. From the side, a voice urged him to stop hesitating and act. At the very instant before impact, a knight stepped between them, declaring the fight over. His blade intercepted Ellis's strike, the force echoing through the castle walls before he grabbed Cheyenne by the collar. His glare fixed on Ellis as he accused her of going too far against the boy. Relief washed over Cheyenne. He had been waiting for this knight to intervene, but it had taken too long. Ellis, seeing the weapon in front of her, seemed to snap back to herself. She rushed forward, embracing Cheyenne tightly, apologizing as tears streamed down her face. She confessed she had lost control and cried on his shoulder, saying she only wanted to keep him from the front lines, because the thought of losing him terrified her. In her arms, Cheyenne thought of who she truly was. Ellis Nanan, trained at one of the S-grade academies, a swordswoman of the highest caliber. She had a striking face, praised as if she were born from the gods themselves. Everyone believed she was destined to stand as the next protector of consonants, alongside Eshel. Yet soon after joining the Knights of Light, her life met a miserable end. Cheyenne embraced her, saying he had missed her, and promising that this time he would be the one to protect her. Elise turned to the knight, asking why he was there when he had once been the Duke's personal guardian. The knight replied that he was following the Duke's command to protect the young master. Cheyenne realized he had sensed this man's presence ever since leaving his father's office, which explained his frustration when the knight hadn't appeared earlier. Now, with his strength failing, he wondered why his father had ordered hidden protection. His thoughts blurred, and he lost consciousness on Elise's shoulder. She held him, smiling faintly, thinking he was still just a child. The following day, she returned to the academy, while Cheyenne pushed himself back into training, determined to face his father again. All he could do was strain his body to the limit, trying to build endurance. But his weak frame betrayed him. 10 push-ups were all he could manage. Remembering his once muscular self, he knew drastic measures were needed. Emily entered his room suddenly, saying Elise had sent him something. She wrinkled her nose, complaining about the stench and asking what it was. After Elise's earlier clash with him, Cheyenne had asked for hellhound blood as an apology gift. To anyone else, its foul odor and revolting appearance marked it as poison. But its true nature was different. It carried the power to permanently enhance stamina. Emily, still pinching her nose, asked if he really intended to drink it. Cheyenne answered firmly, taking a gulp. He told her only he could endure her cooking, so this was nothing. The taste brought back memories of her purple mushroom soup, far worse than this, and with that thought, he slammed the pot on the table, claiming it was delicious, his body radiating energy. Emily called after him, unsettled by the sudden shift. His eyes burned red as he looked back, saying he was going for a walk to test the medicine's effects before leaving the castle. Standing outside, he muttered that he had wanted to return here for a long time. This was the place he always came to when he needed solitude. Not long after, Eshel had received a revelation from the god of light about an ancient temple hidden in this very land. Cheyenne had always been skeptical of it. Pressing a hand to the ground, he whispered that no one else knew of this revelation yet. The earth cracked open, releasing a red mist, and he declared that what he was about to do was something Eshel could never imagine. A hidden passage yawned before him. He wondered if it was finally time to enter. As he stepped inside, he noticed how different it was from his memory. Once, this place had been devoted to the god of light, but centuries of ruin had consumed it. The devastation dated back to the Holy War 300 years earlier. Cheyenne stared around in disbelief, finding it hard to accept that such a place truly existed. At the altar, his eyes caught the glow of a sword, radiating power. He recognized it instantly. It was the weapon bound to this temple. In the year 999, humans had finally expelled the demons from the empire of Velas. It was then that artifacts known as the God's Treasures were unearthed. Among them was the sacred blade Drandark, the weapon that had carried mankind into the war against demons, the very same sword that Eshel had used to strike him down in that tragic end. Cheyenne stared at the sword, imagining it might have something to do with his regression. He touched it with hesitation, then lowered his head, muttering that he already knew nothing would happen. Disgust rose in him, and he kicked the blade aside, leaving with the thought that it only made him feel worthless. From beneath the light, shadows stretched out, and Cheyenne realized he had found exactly what he had been searching for. Looking at the ground, he noted that anyone would assume it was just the sword's shadow, but that was no ordinary shadow. He pressed his hand to the floor, whispering that wherever there was light, shadow would follow. Steps revealed themselves, leading into a dark door. Cheyenne opened it with caution. On the altar ahead, he finally found what he had come for, the demonic blade, Karam. He lifted the dagger, its crystal carving gleaming faintly. He muttered that it could awaken now. Cutting wildly in every direction, he noticed its slumbering state. Yet the sensation thrilled him. It was the same blade he had wielded his entire life, its sharpness oddly satisfying. From the floor, a shadow rose, a voice calling him a brave child. The figure asked if he even understood the meaning of taking that weapon. Cheyenne answered bluntly. It meant the dagger was his. The shadow swelled, unable to believe he had awakened a demonic blade. With a twisted smile, it declared that it was already too late, then lunged at him, screaming that his body now belonged to her. Cheyenne caught her by the throat, leaving her stunned. Her face surfaced from the mass of darkness, and Cheyenne remarked that he hadn't had much else to do at the time. The blade demanded to know how he could even touch her. He repeated his words. She belonged to him now. Her nails, sharp and pink, slashed across the air. He dodged and stepped back, while she pulled away, trying to create distance. It was clear to him. This was the strongest weapon he had ever seen a protagonist handle, a real danger to everything around it. The figure demanded to know who he was, noticing the shadow peeling from her form. She pressed further, asking if he was the heir, or at least why he carried the heir's energy. Cheyenne confirmed it. He was the heir. And now, as her master, She'd do best to lower her head and stay silent. Karam seethed with rage, spitting that he was just a child. She lunged again, swearing she would never accept him. Cheyenne parried, already knowing the truth. The blade's only goal was to devour its wielder and claim their body. That left little room for compromise. As her strike neared, he wondered briefly if he should hold back. A smirk crossed his face as he activated control over the demonic blade. Karam was slammed to the ground, unable to comprehend what had happened. Cheyenne warned her once, telling her to accept it while he was still being lenient. Suppressed, Karam demanded to know how he was capable of using such an ability. Cheyenne responded by seizing control again, forcing her head into the ground. And before she could say another word, he unleashed the power several more times. Watching her face pressed into the ground, Cheyenne asked if she understood now. She admitted defeat, saying she recognized him as her master. He prepared to unleash the power again, but she quickly called him Lord. With that, Cheyenne had achieved his goal. He wondered if it was time to head back before his absence was noticed. In his grip, Karam whispered that she longed to feel fresh air once more. Curious about him, she asked his name. When he told her, the blade questioned if he truly was the chosen heir. Cheyenne replied that he was, but only in a past life. Karam faltered, unable to grasp what he meant. He explained flatly that he had already died once. The dagger grew even more unsettled, convinced he was insane. Approaching the great sword resting nearby, she commented that it was still asleep. Cheyenne warned her that its owner would appear in 20 years. She demanded to know how he could possibly know that, but he was already pulling the blade free. Without pause, he slashed the handle clean. She asked why, baffled. Cheyenne simply answered that he didn't know anymore, only that the future would be interesting. By morning, a carriage rolled away from Verdi Castle. The promised reinforcement for Cheyenne had arrived faster than expected. He presented himself before his father, who asked again if he was truly resolved to go to the front lines. Cheyenne answered that his heart was already there. The Duke ordered the knight to release the beast. The knight unfurled a scroll, and Cheyenne wondered if it would be a summoning spell. A red pentagram glowed, and from it, a creature with a flaming back began to emerge. Cheyenne recognized it instantly, a hellhound. Seeing it, he realized his father and the knights had prepared this test carefully for him. Their hands hovered near their weapons, ready to draw at any moment, every one of them cautious with his life. The Duke warned that everything carried weight, that he would have to prove his will by surviving this trial. The word test made the knight hesitate, recalling when Cheyenne had asked to train with him. The knight had been confused at the request, but Cheyenne had explained that he had only 3 days until the trial and needed to sharpen himself. He had asked the knight to help him practice combat skills. The knight suggested he train with Krantz or others his age, but Cheyenne feigned ignorance, claiming he didn't know why Krantz always turned hostile whenever they met. The soldier was caught in a dilemma. Cheyenne smirked when the knight finally agreed, though with one condition: he would not draw his sword, only defend himself. Cheyenne accepted, but requested one more thing. The knight was not to inform the Duke of anything that happened during their training. He declared it an order. Yelkin hesitated, confused by the demand. But before he could ask further, Cheyenne lunged straight at him. Yelkin blocked the first strike, but disbelief ran through him at the strength of a 10-year-old. Cheyenne's movements were sharp and fast, his figure vanishing before Yelkin's eyes. He looked around in confusion, only to sense danger above. Cheyenne was already there, dropping with another blow. Yelkin turned just in time to parry. Cheyenne pressed on, attacking without pause, his strikes relentless. After several exchanges, Yelkin lowered his guard, admitting defeat. Cheyenne remarked that he still couldn't overcome him, yet thanked him for the help and said he had done well. Breathing heavily, Yelkin returned the words, admitting the boy's strength was shocking. He couldn't believe such a skinny child could carry so much power. If what he felt that day was true, the master of Kerningum would surely overcome any test placed before him. The hellhound then fixed its gaze on Cheyenne and lunged. Calm, he stood his ground as the beast snapped forward to bite. A slash tore through its eye, dropping the creature to the ground. Cheyenne glanced back, thinking that with his current strength, he had to end this quickly. The monster rose again, but he was already prepared. His blade flashed, cutting straight through its skull, the attack ending with a throw from above. The knights present stared in shock, while his father looked on with a smile. Cheyenne eyed the corpse, muttering it was a shame to waste so much blood. But he knew drinking it would only make the others think he had lost his mind. So he left it. Wallace stepped forward to praise him, saying the display was incredible and promised they would meet again at the front. Cheyenne gave his thanks. From within, Karam's voice stirred, calling out and demanding to know if she was nothing more than a kitchen knife. Cheyenne dismissed that thought, reminding her she was a demonic blade. She questioned why she wasn't being used, insisting her strength could only return through blood. She begged for just a taste from the hellhound's body, but Cheyenne told her not to worry. She would be used as much as she desired. Far to the north, the battlefield shook under an ogre invasion. The bells rang, and Wallace commanded that not a single creature be allowed to escape. Soldiers raised their swords, triggering the Salvation Prison. A massive, shining cross appeared above the battlefield, while magic circles lit up beneath the ogre's feet. Chains of light burst upward, binding their massive bodies. Wallace's order rang out, and the soldiers struck. With the beasts immobilized, their victory seemed effortless. One ogre screamed as a soldier closed in, blade in hand, gripping tightly and preparing for the final cut. With one clean strike, the monster's head was severed. Not far away, Cheyenne and Emily watched the clash unfold, her face pale with fear. She demanded to know why he had dragged her into a place like this. Cheyenne, strangely enough, felt a sense of longing, as if he had missed this battlefield. Wallace asked his son what he thought of standing at the front lines. Cheyenne admitted he was a little nervous. His father warned him that he could always return, that this was a place where death could claim him at any moment, so he had better stay sharp. Cheyenne smirked, saying he'd keep that in mind. Death here was ordinary, with 3 or 4 battles breaking out every day. The knights fought to hold back the demonic advance. Cheyenne's tent had been placed in the safest location, farthest from the main fighting. The problem was that under constant watch, he couldn't find an opportunity to feed Karam. While wondering if he'd have to wait until night, he noticed Emily hiding beneath the covers. She cried out that the Duke himself had warned they could die any moment. Cheyenne told her to pack up and leave if she was that scared. She shouted it was impossible, that he couldn't survive without her, not in a land crawling with monsters. Then, without warning, she stormed out saying she was going to get food, ignoring his demand about the cloak he had asked for. Rage simmered in him. This woman never obeyed. Later, he left a doll of himself lying on the bed, figuring that might be enough to fool others. Emily looked at him and asked if he was really going to train in a place like this. She said he was too diligent, and if the Duke found out, he'd be proud. Cheyenne ignored her words. He said he was heading out, and she could rest there without worry. Looking back, he ordered her to claim he was asleep if anyone asked. At that moment, soldiers were needed at the front in greater numbers than ever, which gave him freedom to move unnoticed. He activated his mist glide ability and slipped into the dangerous outskirts, where a pack of hellhounds waited. His blood stirred with excitement. This was the perfect chance to test Karam. When summoned, the blade breathed in the scent of blood and trembled with hunger, saying she couldn't endure it any longer. She needed to cut something. The hellhounds charged, and Cheyenne promised her a feast. He struck them down, unleashing furious mist storm. When the pack lay dead, he pulled the blood straight from their skulls and drank deeply. His eyes lit with madness as he muttered that this was what he craved. Karam pulsed with delight. He told her they would keep hunting, but she complained the hellhounds were far too weak. Cheyenne assured her not to worry. The night was long, and the battlefield swarmed with prey. She answered, seething with anticipation. Elsewhere, a carriage rolled through the mountains. Inside sat a girl with white hair. A guard warned her the land ahead was too dangerous and urged retreat, but the girl refused, declaring she wasn't a child. She was a princess of the empire, and it was her duty to stand beside her family. If the woman dared to speak further, the princess threatened to vent her anger on her. Her attendant warned instead that young Master Verdi was also at the front, the same age as her. She questioned whether the Duke truly had the courage to bring along his youngest son. The companion explained it wasn't the Duke's decision. The boy had volunteered. Since they were of equal age, she suggested they might become friends. The princess dismissed the idea, uninterested, and turned away to sleep. The servant let it go with a simple nod, but the princess suddenly asked for the boy's name. The answer came, Cheyenne Verdi. Under the pale moonlight, she silently repeated the name, lost in thought. Elsewhere, harpies were being slaughtered across the battlefield. Wallace commanded his men to tend to the wounded. Dozens of harpies and griffins lay dead as the soldiers prepared to march back to camp. Looking aside, Wallace saw someone yank a blade from the corpse of a harpy. It was Cheyenne, who had fought alongside them. Wallace asked how he was adjusting to life on the front lines. Cheyenne answered that each day brought new lessons. The Duke remarked that he had expected him to long for home, but after all this time, seeing him still here filled him with pride. Those words left Cheyenne stunned. Wallace left soon after, saying there would be something to discuss in the morning. Cheyenne agreed, thinking it was the first time he had ever seen pride in his father's expression. That night, Cheyenne went out hunting once again. His prey was a death worm, a creature usually hidden deep within the valleys. Karam remarked that he looked worn out, blaming it on his refusal to let her take over his body. Cheyenne replied she was being too obvious, but she pressed harder, pointing out how the worm's flesh regenerated faster than his blows could land. He didn't want to admit it, but she was right. Over a month had passed with him in this place, every day consuming the blood of countless demonic beasts. Yet he still hadn't reached what he sought. As the worm lunged again, he declared there was no other choice. For now, he would fight by Karam's rules. She rejoiced, saying it was finally time to unleash chaos. He activated the 9th assassination technique, manifestation of the demonic blade. His face turned dark as countless cuts tore into the worm's body. The beast writhed, and Cheyenne vowed to slice it apart. Under the moonlight, he invoked another move, 8 fluttering petals, showering the worm with slashes from head to tail. Its maw burst open in a violent explosion, and in that moment he looked nothing short of demonic. Not far off, a knight pressed his fingers into the blood of a hellhound and noted it was still fresh. It was Yelkin, investigating alongside Wallace. They exchanged glances and concluded the signs pointed to the work of the demonic tribe. Staring at the remains, Wallace muttered that the cuts looked strangely familiar, almost like déjà vu. From behind a rock, Yelkin stepped forward, saying he needed to show something. Wallace asked what, and Yelkin lifted a torch, revealing the death worm split clean in half. The sight made Wallace tense, fear creeping in as he whispered disbelief that such an organization could be responsible. The manifestation of the demonic blade had taken Cheyenne's body, allowing Karam to wield her full power. But he knew if he lost focus for even a moment, his mind would be swallowed whole. By the next morning, he opened his eyes, cursing himself as insane for using that kind of power just to kill a beast. Rising from the bed, he admitted luck was the only reason he survived. Luck that he had drunk so much blood, or else his body would have been shattered. Karam's voice stirred, saying she finally understood. He looked like a 10-year-old child, yet neither his words nor his actions matched that. It was her first time being used, yet he handled her as if they had fought together for decades. He knew every curve of the valley's terrain. He fought as though he had mastered the mist technique for over 30 years. She remembered him once saying he had died, and now she was certain. He was a regressor. Shatton added that he had already explained it clearly. She had just failed to grasp it. The blade shrieked, outraged, demanding how she was supposed to understand something so heavy when he treated it like a casual statement. Shatton dismissed her anger, saying explanations were tedious. Studying his movements, she admitted it couldn't have been simple to defeat him. With the demonic blade, the only way he could have fallen was against the wielder of Drandark. That meant either a duel lost or a betrayal. Remembering the look on his face when he saw the holy sword, she became convinced it was betrayal. She warned that if he had returned to prepare his revenge, then he needed to remember this. If she ever found him weak or slothful, even for a second, she would devour him instantly. He struck her down with a fist, ordering her silence, reminding her that he was the master. She fell, bruised and shaken, while he smirked, realizing she truly carried the same temperament as before. Leaving the tent, he glanced around and saw disorder everywhere. Amelia rushed toward him, calling his name. He asked if something had happened. Frightened, she explained that the body of a demonic beast had been discovered at the valley's entrance. Cheyenne froze, fearing it might be the death worm. Amelia added that it had been a long time since such a high-level creature was seen near the border. He asked if there was more, pressing her. Nervously, she shook her head, but he asked again. Had anyone spoken about him? Any rumors at all? Before she could answer, a knight appeared behind him, calling out his name. It was Yolkin who arrived with the message that the Duke wanted to see him. Shen immediately understood he was in trouble. Yesterday, while out hunting, his father's men had appeared out of nowhere. He had been forced to abandon the hellhound corpses without erasing any trace. The last thing he wanted was attention before entering the academy. Still, he entered his father's tent, already convinced Wallace knew everything. His father greeted him, while Shen stood uncertain, debating how to respond. Wallace ordered him to sit, and Shen frowned, wondering how he would talk his way out of this. The Duke spoke bluntly, asking what he had been doing the previous night. Nervous and sweating, Shen lied, claiming he had gone to bed early. For a moment, Wallace seemed to accept it, but the unease remained. The cuts on the wolf looked far too similar to the style of his blade. Was he overthinking it, or was it real? Shen asked if something was wrong. Wallace struggled to believe that a boy so young could have done something like that. Shen called to him again, and the Duke asked if he had heard what happened during the night. He explained they were still investigating, but all signs suggested the Mist organization. Shen hesitated, repeating the name. Wallace explained further. It was a group that had existed since ancient times, its purpose unknown. Under the banner of purification, they had slaughtered countless nobles, but then suddenly vanished. The last known traces of them were from 3 centuries ago. Yet the same mist had appeared with the death worm, and that lingering power could only come from those who worshipped the god of mist. His speculation was simple. Whoever killed the worm was one of them. Shen was taken aback that his father could trace an organization that had been gone for 300 years with only that much evidence. Wallace admitted he didn't know why they had disappeared, but warned Shen to stay cautious, promising he would report everything to the Empire. Relief washed over Shen. For now, suspicion had shifted away. Wallace, however, decided it was nonsense to link a boy his age to such a matter and closed the discussion. He then asked if Shen had heard about the visitor arriving that day. Shen answered that it was someone from the royal family. Wallace confirmed it and added that he wanted to ask a favor. Shen, sweating again, grew tense, curious about what that favor could be. Before he could ask, a knight's horn sounded, announcing the arrival of His Majesty. Wallace and every soldier on the field dropped to one knee, welcoming the Emperor. The Emperor, pale and sharp like a vampire, greeted Wallace warmly, calling him an old friend and telling him formality was unnecessary. His gaze then shifted, asking if the boy at his side was his son. Shen stepped forward, introducing himself as the youngest of the Vert family. The Emperor remarked to Wallace that it was impressive to see his son serving on the front lines. Truly, his children were remarkable. The favor Wallace asked of Shen was simple: introduce himself openly as his son. In his past life, he had remained hidden, almost invisible, and no one had even known of his existence. The Emperor then declared it the perfect time for Shen to step into the light. From the carriage, a shoe touched the ground, and a girl presented herself as Erin Severus, the Empire's 5th princess. Shen recalled the name. She was remembered as the unlucky princess. One of the favors Wallace had mentioned was that Shen would escort her. The boy felt confused, knowing his strength wasn't remarkable, and wondered why his father would assign him such a task. Wallace explained it wasn't about strength, only about keeping her company. They were the same age and would soon attend the same academy. In his memories of the previous life, Shen remembered seeing her at the academy, though only in passing when classes changed. Wallace added that having ties to someone of the royal family was always valuable. Even if she wouldn't stay long, the chance was worth seizing. Shen himself wasn't very interested, but he understood his father's intentions. Wallace wanted him to build a bond with her, just as he had with the Emperor. Shen thought to himself that his father had chosen poorly, because that girl would not serve his purpose. Still, he couldn't reveal the reason, only he knew the truth of the future. Annoying as it was, for now, he would have to obey. As they walked alongside the soldiers, Erin asked why the nearby lake glowed red. Shen answered that it was called the Blood Lake, and its color had no mystery. Injured monsters leapt into it to recover mana, and over time the water had taken that color. She pointed out the piles of monster remains scattered around, and Shen replied that was precisely the reason. Then she asked what lay beyond it. He told her a demon kingdom stretched past the lake. Curious, she asked if a demon king resided there. Shen smirked, warning her that if she kept following the lake long enough, she would meet the king in flesh and bone. It was his way of mocking her for the childish question. Suddenly a burst of light ripped through the sky. Yellow smoke split the horizon, and Erin turned wide-eyed, asking what it meant. Shen explained that a golden flare marked the arrival of demonic creatures. Frightened, she asked if they had already crossed over. Wallace barked an order for everyone to shield His Majesty, declaring they were heading to the 3rd outpost. The Emperor, however, sighed in disappointment. Wallace asked what troubled him. The pale sovereign drew his blade, revealing his intent. He hadn't come merely to visit. He was restless and longed for combat again. Wallace bowed his head in understanding. The emperor turned to his men and commanded them to support the eradication squad in clearing out the threat. Wallace summoned Shen as well, and the boy responded without hesitation. Eren, startled, asked if he truly intended to fight. Shen told her yes. Though overlooked, he always stood on the front line. She declared she would go with him. He narrowed his eyes, questioning her motives, but she argued that they were the same age, so it shouldn't matter. Shen shot back coldly that the battlefield was no playground. She refused to give up, insisting it didn't matter. She wanted to go. Cian called for Yelkin, who appeared behind her and promised to take her somewhere safe. She spun around, and Yelkin told her to follow. Furious, she shouted at Cian, accusing him of insolence for treating an imperial princess that way. He stepped closer, warning that her stubbornness would cost lives on the front line. Would she shoulder that responsibility? Tears welled up. After all, she was still a child. Cian turned away, ordering her to leave quickly and stop behaving like a spoiled brat. Silence fell over the three of them. On the battlefield, chaos raged. Soldiers were being dragged down, devoured by writhing demonic slugs. Wallace raised his blade, commanding the troops back into formation. He pointed forward, ordering them to guard his majesty and slaughter every last one of those creatures. With a roar, the soldiers charged. The emperor, Dion Severos, had once taken 2 wives. The first, Anna, was long dead. The second, Cassandra, now ruled as empress. Between them, they bore him 4 children. But the 5th princess had been born of a peasant woman, and so scorn followed her everywhere. Despite that, she refused to bow. As a child of the imperial bloodline, she fulfilled her duties and studied harder than any of her siblings. Even so, her enemies never relented. False charges stripped her of her place in the palace, and she was cast away into isolation. That was how she became branded as the unlucky princess. Karam asked if this matched what Cheyenne remembered hearing from his father in the past life. Cheyenne muttered that politics and power always twisted that way. Meanwhile, electric slugs were being cut down across the battlefield. From a distance, Cheyenne watched explosions tear the ground apart, realizing how overwhelming the Emperor's strength was. Dion drove his sword into the soil and unleashed a sacred ray, annihilating every slug in reach. Cheyenne recalled hearing that this man's magic reached the 8th star. If he hadn't risen as Emperor, he would have been named President of the Magic Council. To him, mid-level beasts like these were nothing. Later, Wallace and Dion sat drinking together, sharing memories of the old days. The Emperor shifted the talk to the Empire's current state. In recent years, many nobles had been slaughtered, and unrest spread like fire. Wallace suspected the events were connected. Dion revealed that every one of the murdered nobles had been corrupt, and each scene of death carried traces of black mist. Did Wallace know anything about it? Wallace admitted that followers of the Black Mist seemed to have resurfaced. He had even found signs near his own base. Dion agreed it was possible, though more investigation would be needed. He even admitted, half in jest, that part of him wanted to thank those behind it for purging corrupt trash. But in the end, the killings only deepened the Empire's unrest. And there was one detail that caught Wallace's ear more than anything else. One of the nobles had claimed the 5th princess was tied to the murders. Wallace asked if people were truly trying to link her to such things. The Emperor admitted he knew it was nonsense to blame a child, but still asked Wallace to look after his daughter if he were to die. Wallace swore on that request, and the Emperor gave thanks. That night, the rain hammered against the tents. Emily pressed Cheyenne, asking if he had really said those things. He ignored her, saying he was leaving. She kept pushing, wanting to know if he had truly spoken that way to the princess. In her view, if he kept acting like that, he would never marry and would live out his life in solitude. Cheyenne brushed it aside, telling her to forget it. He was going out to train. She asked if he was really planning to go in the middle of the storm. He told her not to worry and to sleep. Only Eren was already there. Emily flinched, startled by the hooded figure. Eren pulled her hood back and asked if he was heading somewhere, but if not, she wanted a word. Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of the princess. Eren asked how long they had been camped there, and Cheyenne answered over a month. Still, he pressed to know why she had come. She hesitated, avoiding the question. Both turned to Emily and told her to leave, and she slipped out, grinning mischievously, teasing them to enjoy the tent. Cheyenne, with his mind of a 40-year-old, felt no interest in her. Eren apologized for the morning's events. He awkwardly admitted his own fault, and she laughed, saying she would have reacted the same. She confessed that unlike him, She wasn't acknowledged by those around her. Cheyenne hadn't imagined she carried such a side to her. She went on, saying she knew he would be going to the academy and that she wanted to be his friend. Cheyenne cut her off, apologizing, saying he couldn't accept that. If her purpose was to get closer to him, then she should leave now. She bowed her head, hurt, saying she only wanted to draw nearer, but he was being cruel. Did he think she was nothing more than a princess by name? Cheyenne kept silent. Tears welled up in her eyes as she said she understood. From his view, she had nothing to offer, and she apologized for wasting his time. Perhaps she was wrong to think they could talk. She added bitterly that he was nothing like Lord Eschel. That name sent a jolt through Cheyenne. He spun, grabbing her arm. She told him to let go, demanding to know why he was acting like that. Cheyenne pressed her, asking how she knew of his older brother. She explained that she had met him when she visited the academy the previous year, and he had told her to remain strong as a princess. Cheyenne knew his brother too well. There was no way he had offered advice out of kindness. This meant the manipulation had already begun back then. Cheyenne steadied himself and told her he would give her some advice of his own. The tent suddenly trembled, as if the ground itself had split. Emily burst inside in a panic, shouting for him to run, but a massive pillar had already crashed down, nearly flattening them. The explosion ripped through the canvas, hurling Emily outside. From a distance, everyone caught sight of a giant ogre looming over the wreckage, recognizing it as the young master's tent. Emily cried out, desperate, tears streaming as the ogre raised its club to finish them. The emperor, hearing the commotion, demanded an explanation, and later that night announced grimly that the princess's tent had been attacked by a high-level monster. He commanded all troops from the battlefront to return at once, determined to know who she had crossed paths with in such a dangerous place. The giant ogre rampaged, smashing the rear section of the base. Hidden in the chaos, Cheyenne stared in disbelief. An ogre here? That breed of monster only appeared deep in the valley. Doubt crept in. Was this his fault? Emily's voice broke through, sobbing that she thought he had been killed. But at the moment of impact, he had pulled Aaron close and leapt aside. Someone who had once crushed the Demon King's army would not fall to a mere ogre. Aaron asked if the knights would survive. Emily, trying to soothe her, insisted they were strong enough. Still, the princess wept, blaming herself. If she hadn't been there, none of this would have happened. The knights reassured her that it was their duty to protect, one even smiling as he swore they would give their lives if needed. Cheyenne's warning came too late. A massive hand slammed down from behind, crushing the knight in an instant, blood spilling as the ogre lifted the limp body high. Standing on its back, Cheyenne told Aaron to cling to him. The beast sniffed the air, confirming his suspicion. These creatures weren't here by chance. They had come for him. He began to tell Emily to take the princess and flee, but she was already gone, sprinting with Aaron in her arms. He couldn't help but note how fast she ran when survival was at stake. The ogre bore down, ready to smash him. He couldn't draw the demon blade without raising suspicion. Questions churned. Why were these monsters hunting him? What scent were they following? Karam's voice cut through, mocking him. He had been drinking demon blood for too long, and now he reeked of it, a stench that drew beasts straight to him. Rage boiled, so the sage had known all along and said nothing. She only laughed, reminding him that all she wanted was his body. He gripped her hard, forcing her into her dagger form as she asked what he was planning. He realized there was no choice left. Against this beast, he would have to unleash everything. He lunged forward, meeting the ogre's swing head-on. With one decisive strike, he ripped the creature's arm clean off. In the same breath, he appeared behind its neck, slicing it open with a single brutal motion. The boy carried himself with confidence, and with only 2 swift cuts, the beast collapsed lifeless on the ground. He muttered that now it was only a matter of cutting down the curious ones that still lingered. Ahead of him, more creatures appeared, and Karam's voice echoed with excitement, calling it a festival she had been waiting for. But his focus snapped when a demonic dragon revealed itself. The beast roared toward the sky, shaking the air itself. Karam told him not to lose his nerve, it was only a young one. Cheyenne immediately called forth the manifestation of the demon blade. Raising the dagger, he commanded it to devour the enemy. Meanwhile, at the base, soldiers fought desperately against the invading ogres. The Emperor and Wallace had just slain the last of them. The Emperor asked if there was any sign of the princess. Wallace bowed his head and admitted she had been in his son's tent. The Emperor asked if he wasn't worried about his son, but Wallace replied coldly that there was no need to worry about that boy. The only one who mattered was the princess. The emperor stared at him in disbelief, shocked by such cruelty. A soldier rushed in, announcing that Princess Erin had been found. She appeared soon after, hurrying to her father. He asked if she was injured, and she said no, but begged him to act quickly. Cheyenne was in danger because of her. He tried to calm her, telling her to explain. Wallace then turned to Emily, asking if she was his son's maid. When she confirmed, he ordered her to tell them what had happened. Shaking, Emily explained that Cheyenne had drawn the attention of the monsters so that the princess could escape. Wallace remained silent. One of the knights stepped forward, saying he knew the location, and that if given the order, they could head out to rescue him. The Emperor snapped at Wallace, demanding why he hadn't already given the command. But Wallace refused. The Emperor and Erin stared at him in shock, asking what he meant. Wallace said the recovery of His Majesty had to take priority. If the base fell, the demonic beast would pour into the Empire. Rebuilding their defenses was the only way to prevent further disaster. Emily's voice broke, asking what would become of the young master. Wallace replied that the boy had already done his duty by saving the princess. That was the way of the Vert family. The Emperor and Erin looked at him after those words, while the princess thought again that it was all her fault. Suddenly, the sound of a great battle shook the sky. Erin lifted her gaze and froze. Above them, a dragon was soaring past, and to her disbelief, Cheyenne was clinging to its tail, being carried away. In this world, dragons were the closest beings to the gods, considered the most advanced form of life itself. To encounter such a creature was normally seen as the highest honor. So why was the dragon flying so close to the camp? Erin screamed his name, and the Emperor turned on Wallace, demanding to know what his son was doing up there. Wallace stayed silent, and the Emperor pressed harder, asking why he wasn't moving. High above, Cheyenne himself didn't know what he was doing. He only wanted a drink of blood, but the situation had spun out of control. The moment the dragon appeared, he had challenged it. A wave of weak monsters had rushed at him, and he blasted them aside, sending their bodies flying toward the front lines. Calling on the furious mist, he carved straight through the battlefield and charged toward the dragon. Up close, he realized it wasn't fully grown. Even so, the beast gathered power for an attack, and fear shot through him. The explosion burst, a beam of light tearing across the field. He dodged at the last second and ended up near the dragon's head. He taunted it for daring to spit at him the instant they crossed paths. With a sharp slash, he drove his blade into its eye. Suspended in the air, he had no footing, and the dragon lunged. At the brink of being skewered, he smirked and unleashed the mist blade. The 8 fluttering cuts struck from all angles, slashing into the beast. The dragon crashed down, detonating the ground in a massive shockwave. Cheyenne felt the weight of it. Killing a dragon was impossible. His shoulders burned with exhaustion. But now that it was grounded, he moved in for the finishing strike. The dragon beat its wings, pulling away, and he braced for another beam. Yet instead, the beast turned tail and fled, wings thrashing in fear. Cheyenne hurled himself after it, roaring that it wouldn't escape, latching onto its tail. The problem came when he glanced down. Everyone below could see him. How was he supposed to explain this? Karam mocked him, asking why he was frozen like a statue. He snapped back, asking if she didn't see the crowd staring up at them. Furious, she demanded to be used since she had already been summoned. He refused, saying if he used anything demonic, they would stop him immediately. She screamed, asking what he planned to do then. He said he was thinking, and told her to shut up. On the ground, Wallace began weaving light magic. Cheyenne recognized it instantly, an 8-star spell. His own father was about to fire at him. Shock and anger mixed. What kind of parent did that? Wallace raised his sword to the skies and released the strike. Cheyenne braced in despair, but the dragon suddenly dived, weaving past the incoming magic. He laughed bitterly, praising the beast for doing well and telling it not to take the hit for him. But another beam came from behind, so close he couldn't avoid it. It struck his leg, the same one gripping the dragon. His hold slipped, and as he plummeted, his only thought was a strange sadness. He had lost his lunchbox. While Karam urged him to protect himself, he plummeted head first. He muttered that he couldn't use any mist technique now. She snapped at him, warning that if he kept hesitating, he would die this way. He silenced her, saying he was thinking. In truth, he wasn't going to die, though she couldn't believe what he was about to attempt, until an idea struck. Below him stretched the Red River. He told himself there was no other choice. From afar, someone noticed the dragon fleeing, and remarked how rare such a sight was. The man behind him dismissed it, saying it was just a kid who must have strayed from the group. The silver-haired figure pointed toward the horizon, asking if demons dwelled there. His companion answered that it was actually the human region. The silver-haired one grew curious, saying dragons shouldn't be beaten by humans. He went quiet for a moment, until the man with glasses asked if something was wrong. The silver-haired one pointed out that he sensed an unusual energy in that direction, something strangely familiar. His companion suggested they go see for themselves, but reminded him he was forbidden from annihilating everything just out of boredom. Spreading his wings, he agreed, saying he wouldn't cause trouble. Then he lifted off, promising to return shortly. Meanwhile, Cheyenne emerged from the blood-soaked lake, dragging himself onto the rocks, cursing up to the 10th generation. He asked Karam if she was still alive. Dripping with slime, she hissed at him not to talk, claiming she was busy thinking of ways to kill him. He muttered he'd wash her when they got back, and she answered fine, but warned him to face reality. They were in the demon realm now. Cheyenne brushed it off, insisting that in this place it was rare to meet a high-level demon. Then a voice came from behind, claiming he knew he would find something interesting. Cheyenne froze. It was a voice he could never forget. Turning stiffly, he saw the figure. The demon asked if he was human, and Cheyenne realized it was Valkyrian, the demon king. Memories came rushing back. This was the same man who once told him he was like evil itself, wrapped into one body. Valkyrian pressed, asking why he wasn't answering. Was he not human? In a blink, the demon king appeared at his back, asking if Cheyenne really wanted to fight. Shocked, Cheyenne spun around, striking, but Valkyrian slipped past easily. Still, Cheyenne managed to shear off a single strand of his hair. That was enough to impress him, making him remark how limitless the potential of different races could be. Karam demanded to know who this man was. Cheyenne answered plainly, it was the Demon King. She warned that if he truly was the Demon King, then Cheyenne had no chance of victory. He knew she was right. The smartest move would be to flee, but his trembling hand made him wonder if he could even manage that. Then Valkyrian surprised him. He told him to calm down. He wasn't here to fight a kid, for God's sake. He even lay down on the ground, asking if Cheyenne really thought he'd strike a child. Confusion churned in Cheyenne's mind at the sight of the mighty Demon King lying before him. Valkyrian spoke again, saying he would ask once more. Was he human? Cheyenne admitted he was. Valkyrian then pressed to know, how had he ended up in this place? Cheyenne explained that the sea had carried him there, and the man remarked that it must be his first time in the demon realm. Yet something felt off. He sensed a strange energy and demanded to know what Cheyenne really was. Cheyenne replied that he was just an ordinary human. Valkyrian wasn't convinced. He said the boy might claim that, but it seemed like he already knew who stood before him. Cheyenne denied it, saying it didn't make sense. They were meeting for the first time. The Demon King stretched his arms and mused that maybe that was why he found it interesting. After all, it was also the first time he had seen a human in person. He asked again what brought Cheyenne there, wondering why this kid was so calm. Valkyrian said he'd felt an unusual presence while wandering, and as the Demon King, he was obliged to keep watch over the lands he ruled. Rising from the ground, he told Cheyenne to repeat what he'd just said. Cheyenne repeated his words, that he was the Demon King who watched over his domain. Valkyrian pointed at his own face, saying he wasn't surprised. He was now certain he'd seen the boy somewhere before. What kind of human reacted so casually to a Demon King? Cheyenne knew that soon the invasion of the demon realm would begin, yet this Valkyrian was nothing like the one he remembered. What had changed him so drastically? He asked what the Demon King intended to do. Valkyrian smiled, amused by the boy's recklessness. Then he said it was simple. As long as his followers were alive and fed, he had no need for conflict. But if anyone tried to alter that balance, he would destroy them all. That was his duty as the Demon King. For a moment, Cheyenne felt that same ominous energy he remembered from the being who once attacked the Empire. He knew he had to stop that future from repeating, so he asked if Valkyrian would make a deal. The Demon King's curiosity sharpened as he demanded to know what kind of deal. Cheyenne explained that someday something would happen, an event that would threaten all of Valkyrian's subordinates. The Demon King frowned, calling it nonsense, but told him to continue. Cheyenne admitted he didn't know the exact cause, only that it would become the spark for a war between demons and humans. Valkyrian folded his arms, questioning whether Cheyenne truly thought he would wage war on his own realm. Cheyenne said that was exactly why he wanted the deal, so that no matter what occurred, the Demon King wouldn't be the one to start that war. Valkyrian said he didn't understand half of it, but asked what he would gain by agreeing. Cheyenne promised that, whatever came to pass, he would help the Demon King. Valkyrian stepped closer, studying him. He said the boy clearly knew more than he was admitting. Cheyenne broke into a sweat as Valkyrian asked for his name. When he introduced himself, the Demon King nodded and said he would honor the pact as the ruler of demons. Valkyrian took to the sky, warning Cheyenne to keep his end as well. A faint grin crossed his face as he declared the deal sealed. After that encounter, a group of knights eventually discovered Cheyenne's location. When they saw him crawl out of the Red Lake, the soldiers called it a miracle. He was still breathing. From that moment, he became known as the one who survived the demonic dragon. They carried him to the frontline monastery, a place serving as a field hospital for the wounded. Lying there, Cheyenne asked someone to repeat what they had just said. Aaron hesitated, unable to meet his gaze. Then, out of nowhere, she blurted out if he wanted to be hers. He froze, confused by her words, not understanding what she meant. Calmly, he replied that he wasn't interested. The reaction hit her like a slap. She flinched, tears welling again, muttering that it was expected of her, the powerless fifth princess. From his bed, Cheyenne stared at the ceiling, thinking she was really starting to get on his nerves. He knew Aaron was the weakest link in the imperial bloodline, and at the rate she was going, her downfall was inevitable. What bothered him most was the suspicion that his damned brother was somehow tied to her fate. He admitted to himself she was right. At the moment, she couldn't offer him any advantage. No wealth, no influence, nothing to gain. On top of that, being associated with her politically would be reckless. Still, he decided he'd look after her until she figured things out. She asked if he meant that seriously. He said yes, it was a promise, telling her not to worry. Erin rose to her feet, saying she understood, that when she eventually turned the tables, he would have to acknowledge her strength. Pointing at him, she declared she didn't know when, but she would make him recognize her power. Cheyenne only thought to himself that she'd been depressed moments ago. Before leaving, she paused, thanking him simply for surviving. Then she was gone, and the room fell quiet. Elsewhere, deep within the forest near the encampment, a hooded figure stood alone, scanning the area. He held a cube-shaped object in his hand and grinned, saying the task was almost complete. A voice echoed from behind, calling his name, Renal Crimson. His body froze, bound by invisible force. The voice explained that the item he carried was a small dimensional box, one that existed before it was ever commercialized. The artifact could contain anything the user desired. From the shadows, Cheyenne stepped forward, revealing himself. He said it was a masterpiece crafted by the Magic Council. He had been watching this man for a year, tracking his smuggling operations from the Empire. Cheyenne reached out and took the box, saying he'd be confiscating it. Renal Crimson, a magical knight of 7 stars, glared and demanded to know who he was. Recognition hit him immediately. Cheyenne Vert. Cheyenne dumped the contents of the box onto the ground, ignoring Renal's questions. The knight kept pressing, asking how he had found him, but Cheyenne didn't answer. He only remarked that Renal must have had an informant guiding him to the right places at the right time. Renal denied everything, insisting he had no idea what Cheyenne was talking about. Cheyenne told him there was no point in lying. The blood of those creatures was already being sold inside the Empire. That was how the nobles had sent him the Hellhound blood gift in the first place. Renal broke into a cold sweat, wondering who had leaked this information and how this kid knew so much. He couldn't even figure out how Cheyenne had trapped him, but if he could just move even a little. He stretched out his hand, summoning fire magic in an attempt to burn Cheyenne alive. The explosion went off with a roar, the blast engulfing the clearing. Hidden in the smoke, Renal muttered that it was good he had taken the situation seriously. One could never underestimate a member of the Vert family. He allowed himself a breath of relief. Then his body jolted. His hand was gone. He screamed, staring in disbelief as blood sprayed from the stump. The mist before him shifted, taking shape, and when he saw Cheyenne within it, he froze. It couldn't be. The boy was from the mist. Before he could react, Cheyenne seized him by the throat and slammed him against a tree. He gave him 2 choices: confess and die quickly, or deny it and die in agony. Meanwhile, in the Western Trade Zone, workers were sorting through shipments. 2 crates labeled as potions drew their attention. They joked about what might be inside the larger box, curious about its contents. When they pried it open, their smiles vanished. Inside was Renal's severed head. Up on the mountain ridge, Karam asked if he planned to let the others live. Cheyenne said yes. This was enough of a warning. Those men had always been smuggling demon materials into the Empire. The goods would end up in the hands of the Magic Council, a place where people committed every kind of insanity in the name of magical study. Cheyenne muttered that whatever they were doing with demon blood was beyond reason and needed to be stopped. Karam accused him of living for others in this new life. He disagreed, saying he was only preventing more people from using demon blood. Far away in the Empire, inside a lavish mansion, Eshel sat in bed reading a letter. It informed him that Cheyenne had gone to the front line with their father. A woman lounged beside him, curvy, playful, and clearly enjoying his company. Eshel, ever the charming villain, knew how to indulge himself. The woman asked if that Cheyenne was his younger half-brother. Eshel confirmed it, saying the kid was a headache in more ways than one. Suitcases were stacked high as Emily cheered, relieved they were finally leaving the front lines. She was certain the academy would be calmer, safer, and far less chaotic. Cheyenne, however, knew better. The academy was no sanctuary. It was a cruel pit where lives were crushed under political schemes, a place ruled by envy and greed, where, ironically, learning was the least of anyone's concerns. Emily was lost in her own world, rambling about how she'd find a skilled instructor at the academy. That's when Cheyenne began to realize she fully intended to follow him there. Sometime later, he returned to the duchy, enjoying a brief moment of calm. A sudden sound made him turn. Krantz stood there, catching him off guard. The others asked what he was doing around, but before Cheyenne could greet him, the boy had already bolted. Karam's voice echoed in his head, asking who that idiot was. Cheyenne answered it was Krantz, but added that he didn't care. Karam scoffed that his brother was the complete opposite, and Cheyenne replied that didn't make sense. His true opposite was someone else. He opened the door and stepped back into the mansion. This time, every servant greeted him politely. He remembered how they used to ignore him before, but now their courtesy felt hollow, most likely his father's influence. Still, hard work had changed much over the past year. As he reached for the next door, a wave of familiar energy brushed against him. He already knew who it belonged to. His irritation rose as he turned the handle slowly, certain only one person could be waiting on the other side. Eshel stood there, saying it had been a long time. Cheyenne clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his composure. When he didn't respond, Eshel teased him, asking if he'd forgotten his own brother. Cheyenne tried to keep calm, but his eyes were already burning red. He couldn't, not with him standing there. A dagger materialized in his hand, his intent clear. He would kill him now. But Karam intervened, gripping his wrist and warning him that if he didn't control himself, he'd get his skull smashed before he could act. Besides, killing Eshel now would be far too easy, and not nearly as satisfying. Cheyenne exhaled, forcing the rage down, and greeted his older brother. Eshel smiled faintly and asked if he remembered him. Cheyenne replied that it was impossible to forget a brother's face. Eshel reached out, patting his head as if he were a child, saying he was glad, relieved even, that his little brother still remembered him. He added that he'd heard about Cheyenne's drastic improvement in fencing, claiming he'd soon be a great help to House Vert, especially on the battlefield, where he would fight alongside his brother. Cheyenne agreed calmly, saying he was eager to do just that. Eshel's eyes lingered on him, pleased by the answer. He said the only reason he had come here was to find his little brother. Cheyenne knew exactly what that meant. Eshel never sought out anyone who wasn't useful to him. The moment he realized his brother was only here out of self-interest, Cheyenne's tension eased. Smiling faintly, he said he too had wanted to see his brother again. Emily staggered down the hall, dragging the suitcases with both hands. Exhaustion weighed on her as she dropped them with a loud thud, complaining that the trip had been way too much. She yelled toward the door, demanding how he dared leave all the luggage for her to handle alone, then froze when Eshel appeared right in front of her. He smiled calmly, mentioning he'd heard they were quite close, and told her to keep working hard for Cian. After that, both men left, offering polite thanks, leaving Emily still standing there, pale and speechless. When she recovered, she shouted after Cian, saying she nearly died of fright because he hadn't warned her that Eshel was there. Cian didn't answer. He just told her to step out for a while. When she asked why, his cold stare silenced her. He said it wouldn't happen again. The look on his face startled her. It was something she had never seen before. Moments later, Cian stumbled into the bathroom and leaned over the toilet, vomiting. Dizzy, he asked Karam why she had stopped him earlier. She answered that he should be thanking her. He insisted that it had been the perfect moment, If he had failed, she would have simply taken over his body anyway. Karam told him that the deeper his hatred grew, the stronger it made her. He smirked faintly, saying that was just like her. Meanwhile, a man approached Eshel's chamber door and asked permission to enter. Eshel allowed it, and the man reported that he had confirmed the location of the second young lady. Eshel asked where, and the man explained that she was living on the northern continent, within the elf lands of Pruena. A small smile crossed Eshel's face. He remarked that it was remarkable how she managed to blend even among those she once despised, a sign of how strong her affinity truly was. He ordered the man to report immediately if she showed any intention of returning to the Empire. The man hesitated, then asked if something had happened to change Eshel's mood. Eshel questioned why he thought that, and the man explained that his aura felt far brighter than usual, as if he'd just experienced something exhilarating. Eshel admitted that incredible might be the right word, but at the moment, he was actually furious. The servant froze in fear, stammering out an apology. Eshel's expression darkened. He had studied Cian's gaze earlier. It wasn't the look of a nervous boy. It was the stare of someone who had just seen his enemy. Something was definitely off about that kid. He decided he'd have to keep a close watch. The subordinate nodded quickly, saying he'd assign someone to monitor Cian's every move. Eshel turned toward the window, replaying that moment in his mind, wondering what his brother was hiding. Outside, several carriages were gathered in front of the mansion. Emily stood beside them, yelling that she was extremely disappointed in the young master. Cian dismissed her anger, saying it was her own fault she couldn't come along. She wasn't fit for guard duty. That only made her angrier, snapping that he should have said so earlier. The carriage started moving, and Cian waved casually, telling her to relax. Emily shouted back not to cry just because she wasn't there. He made a goofy face, pretending to agree, which only made her freeze in disbelief that he was actually leaving like that. Emily screamed after him, her voice cracking as she told him that even if the others mocked or beat him, he should never lose heart. From a distance, she kept yelling for him to come back safely. Inside the carriage, memories surfaced. When he was 8, he had fallen ill with a high fever that left him unconscious. No one in the mansion had cared enough to tend to him, except Emily. She had carried him on her back through the rain, searching desperately for help. After wandering for hours, she had finally found an old man willing to open his door. If not for her, he probably would have been discovered dead in one of those cold, empty rooms. He smiled faintly, remembering that moment. With that same warmth, he thought how he'd once told her that if she kept following him like that, she'd end up dead, and that he couldn't take her to the academy because she was too precious to him. Now, sitting alone in the carriage, Cheyenne noticed the absurd number of escorts assigned to him. 6 intermediate knights, just to accompany the young master to the academy. Something about it felt off. He suspected he'd see blood before arriving. By late afternoon, the knights exchanged glances and decided to halt for the day. They told him they would camp there for the night. Cheyenne asked how far they still were, and they replied that the central city of Saffron was close, that they'd reach it by morning. He nodded, but inwardly, he knew they were lying. This forest wasn't anywhere near Saffron. Setting up camp this early, in such an isolated area, while pretending otherwise, it couldn't be coincidence. They were planning something. When they said everything was ready, Cheyenne stepped out of the carriage, feigning ignorance, commenting lightly about how nice the air felt. Surrounded now by the 6 knights, he asked whose orders they were following. One of them hesitated, beads of sweat rolling down their faces. No one answered. Then Cheyenne caught it, the faint smirk on one man's lips. His eyes narrowed. He asked again, voice cold, whose order it was. The smirking knight drew his sword, saying Cheyenne didn't need to know since he'd be dead soon anyway. The others approached, murmuring apologies, insisting it wasn't personal, just duty. They promised to make it quick and told him to close his eyes. The knight stepped forward, sword raised, bidding his farewell, then stopped mid-swing as his head flew clean off. It hit the ground with a dull thud, rolling like discarded garbage. The others froze, staring in disbelief. Cheyenne's tone stayed calm as he repeated the question. Whose order was it? Now, real fear set in. They trembled, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. He looked at them with quiet disdain and asked why they were frozen like statues. Did they truly think it would be that easy? One knight still couldn't process what he was seeing. Another finally snapped, lunging forward to strike from behind. In an instant, Cyan appeared on the other side, slicing twice before anyone could react. 2 men dropped, one taking cuts across the shoulder and arm. Another tried to flee but collapsed in agony mid-run. Shin had only struck from behind. He hadn't needed to do more. The carnage was already done. The man who had been thinking a moment before now sobbed, unable to accept that an 11-year-old could butcher so many. None of them had survived the dragon encounter after all. Using mere intermediate knights for this job had been a disaster. The crying man crumpled to the ground as Cyan stalked closer and demanded to know who gave the order. Through shaking breaths, the man blurted that it had been Duchess Margaret's doing. Shin felt awkward. He hadn't even needed to lift a finger. The confession had done the work for him. The culprit's sobs filled the clearing, and he wondered why the man had talked at all. Nearby, the carriage rolled on while messengers hauled Cyan aboard without hurry. One reported that the plot had been arranged by the young Master Krantz, who'd asked his mother to keep Cyan off his back once they reached the academy. Apparently, the whole ambush sprang from that request. Cyan registered the name of the coward who kept running away. The kid would need a little assistance at the academy, the kind Cyan could provide. Embarrassed, the captured man asked what would happen to him next. He didn't seem very attached to life, admitting that they'd tried to kill Cyan, so his survival seemed unlikely. Cyan ordered him to at least learn to drive the carriage properly. There might be some use for him alive yet. The man swallowed his fear and thanked him. By the time they reached the central city of Saffron, a vase crashed to the floor as panic rippled through the household. Duchess Margaret demanded an explanation for the 6 bodies. The butler stammered that Cyan had arrived in Saffron 10 days earlier and that they'd misjudged the boy. Margaret, furious, refused to believe a 10-year-old could slaughter so many without help. The butler suggested an unknown accomplice, but she cut him off. Plans shifted. An assassin would infiltrate the academy, but if the deed traced back to her and Krantz suffered for it, trouble would follow. Biting her lip, she decided not to act rashly. No one must know about the affair. Better to erase everyone linked to the plot quietly. Behind the curtain, Eshel's spy had overheard the entire conversation. It had been 10 days since Cyan left Saffron. Brian had been keeping up the act of a loyal servant the whole time, aware that word of Cyan's survival must have already reached the mansion. At this pace, it seemed they'd reach the academy without issue. Still, he suspected the boy might start wondering whether he should dispose of him. Before that thought could settle, Brian slid open the small carriage window with a grin, announcing that they had arrived. Cyan acknowledged him with a calm nod. The sight of the city ahead brought memories he'd rather not revisit, none of them good. The academy loomed larger than he remembered. A lot had changed. At the reception, he presented the Verde family's crest. The clerk, visibly eager, promised to register him right away. Everything seemed normal, until Cyan caught something off about her tone. She handed him a sealed letter and a golden key. His eyes widened. He asked if she'd given the right one. Behind him, Brian dropped the luggage with a thud, startled. The royal dormitory, the most luxurious housing available, was supposedly his. But in his previous life, nothing like this had ever happened to anyone. Someone's hand was clearly behind it. He asked if that was the last of the luggage, and Brian confirmed it. Cyan adjusted his coat and remarked that now that they'd reached the academy, Brian's work was done. The man's nervous laugh broke the silence as sweat ran down his temple. Cyan tossed him a pouch of coins. Brian blinked in confusion, asking what that was for. Cyan told him it should be enough to start over somewhere far away, and warned him not to return to the mansion unless he wanted to die. Brian froze, speechless. Then suddenly he dropped to one knee, declaring that he, Brian Kendrick, a once official knight, wished to serve young Master Cyan for the rest of his life. Cyan asked if he was truly a knight. Brian admitted he was, though not a skilled one, more of a helper. His late father had told him that a mediocre knight should never hesitate if he found someone worth following. Cyan dismissed it as nonsense. When Brian asked what he meant, Cyan questioned whether he wasn't afraid of betrayal later. The man replied that even if it happened, he wouldn't regret it. Cyan told him not to say things like that again. It was troublesome enough already. Moments later, they entered through the academy gates. The entrance ceremony was starting, and they'd go straight to the exam. Brian, sweating, nodded in silence. Inside, the dean and a young woman discussed the new batch of promising students. The room was packed with nervous faces. In the center, a girl stood out. Rin Saval-Ru, radiating a visible aura. Her magical rank was 2 stars, physique grade B, and her light affinity measured at 52%. Nearby, another student drew attention. Setcha Harkin, a 3-star mage with an A-grade physique and an earth affinity of 71%. The old man scratched his beard, studying the report in front of him. The students this year were impressive. But this particular boy stood out even among them. His magical grade registered at 1 star, yet his physique ranked S. His element was darkness, an astounding 92%. Across the table, the academy instructor, Sirikan Negriti, commented that even Elise Vert, the so-called daughter of God, possessed only an 88% water element. The old man found that amusing. The one everyone believed to be born with untouchable talent had been surpassed by her own brother. The man speaking was none other than the academy's chancellor, Kundal Quizzle. Still, Sirikan raised a concern. His element was darkness. The chancellor reminded her that such an affinity was rare and dangerous. Many who bore it never managed to control or awaken it, letting their gift rot away. Yet he added that Sheen had been granted a royal dormitory. Sirakan confirmed she'd already heard about it from other instructors, and the chancellor explained it had come directly from the emperor. Apparently, the boy had saved Princess Erin on the demon beast front lines. Rumor had it the emperor was even considering marriage between the two. The 5th princess, long excluded from succession, and the Verde family, famed for producing exceptional warriors. When asked what such an alliance might bring, Sirikan predicted it would stir unrest within the empire, perhaps even more bloodshed. The chancellor merely replied that for now, they could only watch and see whether the boy would rise as a hero or descend into catastrophe. Walking down the corridor, Shien mulled over the number, 92%. In his previous life, it had been only 80. Maybe it was the result of drinking all that demon beast blood. His thoughts broke when he noticed someone ahead, Krantz. Krantz froze at the sight of him, muttering that Shien looked strange. Behind him stood a stocky boy who smirked and asked if this was the kid who'd been bossing Krantz around. The same boy sneered, mocking that Shien didn't even know who his mother was. Shien recognized him instantly. Popper Penneron, son of Marcus, one of Krantz's old lackeys who'd helped torment him in his past life. Seeing the two together again was almost satisfying. Popper shoved Krantz aside, saying the kid needed to be crushed. Krantz panicked, begging him not to, but before he could finish, a fist slammed into his face, sending him crashing against the wall. While Krantz groaned, Sheen crouched beside him, asking if he wanted to talk about a few things. Hesitant and trembling, Krantz agreed. Sweat poured down his face as Sheen rested a hand on his shoulder. In a calm voice, he warned that he didn't mind plans being made, but if he found out about one more scheme, Krantz wouldn't graduate with all 4 limbs intact. Krantz collapsed to the ground, defeated, while Shien turned away, muttering that this academy was going to be entertaining. Elsewhere, in one of the restricted archives, Sarika was deep in thought about him. She admitted to herself she'd have to keep a close eye on that boy. Walking over to a shelf, she reached for a certain book, only to find it missing. Behind her, a voice asked if she was looking for something. She turned sharply, startled, only to see Shien holding the very book. Composing herself, she smiled, adopting a friendly tone as she asked what a student was doing there. This was a restricted area. What puzzled her most was that she hadn't sensed his presence at all. She stepped closer, confirming that he must be the boy named Shien, and politely requested he return the book. It was research material. He agreed and extended his hand, but instead of the book, she noticed he passed her a single sheet of paper. Before she could question it, Shien's expression shifted. He felt something, a heavy, foreign aura approaching fast. A book suddenly lifted itself from the shelf, and Shien noted it was the very volume Sarika had been searching for. Instructor Sarika, the hidden head of the Miss Assassins, stood there, and she wanted to know how he'd discovered her secret. In his past life, he had treated her as just another teacher. She had checked on his progress, held counseling sessions, and praised his growth potential while he shrugged it off as empty praise. But then she revealed interest in him, intrigued by his high darkness affinity, 84% back then. He'd said dark elements often lay dormant, but she argued humanity simply didn't understand darkness yet. She'd called his potential limitless, and that stirred something in him. He'd hoped she might guide him. He'd been fooled. The woman behind the glasses was no gentle instructor. She ran the Assassin's Network, hiding inside the academy where the continent's nobles gathered. Now she suggested they continue the talk in her lab. Shien froze. She seemed calmer than expected. The lab looked the same, until he nearly sipped coffee and realized she'd laced it with a toxin. That explained her composure. Something meant to melt organs, she admitted coolly. Shien scoffed inwardly. After surviving Emily's cooking, nothing could poison him. He asked for something stronger next time. She said it was time for serious talk. She wanted to know how he learned her true role, that he knew where secret commands hid in the unread books. Did he plan to confess that he was part of the mist before she exposed him? Sheen refused to prove anything. She accused him of getting cocky because of his affinity, and he replied that nobles were dropping dead. Surely a purge would start soon. She smiled thinly and feigned ignorance, then activated her aura as if to intimidate. Sheen clarified. He meant the murders. Sarika spat venom, warned he'd regret his tone, then lost it, kicking the table and throwing reagents at him. Karam flinched. Sarika was brutal. In an instant, she was behind him with a dagger drawn, claiming that as assassin leader she could not ignore a mist member. She slashed. Sheen dodged. She struck again, relentless, but he pulled Karam out of the line and used her to block. He decided actions spoke louder than words. If she wouldn't believe him, he'd force belief. He launched into a calculated assault, driving her back. Sweat ran down her face as she realized the blade he used was no ordinary weapon, the demon blade only the chosen could wield. Karam's demonic weapon gleamed, and Sheen asked if she finally understood. He warned that the mist would be hunting her now. Sarika demanded to know how he knew, and he answered coldly that the person she'd been searching for stood right in front of her. Elsewhere, in a ruined street, an isolated house clicked open as someone used magic to unseal a padlock. Sarika and Sheen stood together, and he remarked that she didn't seem too impressed that the mist's hideout was hidden right here. The tunnel ahead led directly to the altar he sought, so he told her he'd go alone. He walked deeper into the winding passage, a subspace shaped by the power of the god of the mist. Because of its warped nature, the tunnel stretched far beyond what the eye could perceive. Even so, he remembered every twist, every trap. From the darkness behind him, attackers emerged. He sighed, thinking this kind of welcome ceremony was a bit much. Parrying blows, he stepped back as mud-like projectiles rained toward him. One of the ambushers almost got himself killed dodging his own attack, forcing Sheen to block the rest. The kid's quick reaction impressed him. The attacker smirked, activated a secret art, and split into multiple clones, circling him from every direction. But Sheen had his own tricks. Recognizing the technique, they couldn't understand how someone so young could use it. Then his aura shifted. The wave of murderous intent rippled through the air, a killing art known only to veteran assassins. The men gasped for breath and dropped to the floor, unconscious. He knew they wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Only one remained standing. Maybe an executive? Sheen prepared another move, but the man struck first, deflecting the blow and using a skill that disrupted Sheen's own. The attacker's mask fell, revealing Sarika beneath it. She smirked, admitting she could no longer hold back, calling him Sheen Vert. He froze, caught off guard. Sarika, again in front of him, demanded that he show his true strength. Sheen responded with his savage strike, sending her flying across the chamber. She landed on her feet, eyes gleaming. Intrigued, she wondered aloud how he could use two assassination arts so effortlessly. She wanted to see more, her excitement rising while the others ran for their lives. Sheen knew that look. Combat lust. Once overtaken by it, she wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. He should have fled, but instead, she pressed forward, urging him to continue, insisting it was what he wanted too. She lunged again. He parried. She reminded him that no one would notice anything here. It was a sealed subspace. He didn't need to hold back. Realizing escape was impossible, Sheen prepared to go all in, even if it meant killing her. Then pain shot through his body. Something struck his neck. He collapsed to the ground, dazed. Karam appeared beside him, saying she knew it would end like this and told him to rest. Sarika demanded to know who she was. Karam stepped out of the mist, stating she hadn't planned to interfere, but Sarika should already know. Sarika bowed slightly, recognizing the demonic blade herself, Karam. Karam's tone sharpened with anger as she asked how Sarika dared attack her master. Sarika replied that the whole ordeal had been a test, to confirm his identity. Karam snapped back that she could have just contacted God instead of staging this mess. If Sarika wanted to handle things this way, then Karam decided to treat it as a challenge. Sarika, however, reminded her to worry about the heir first. Karam froze the moment she looked down and saw the boy unconscious and bleeding on the ground. Sarika explained that Karam's materialization was unstable. She was draining every bit of Sheen's life energy just by staying manifested. Karam grabbed him by the collar, furious that someone who had consumed so much blood could still be this weak. Sarika calmly added that, as the leader of the mist, she would never refuse a proper battle. If Karam wanted to challenge her, then she had no choice but to accept. Karam frowned, muttering that the woman was definitely not normal. Xian stirred slightly and asked why Karam had even manifested. She brushed him off, saying she'd crush the reckless girl quickly. Sarika's excitement only grew. She said it would be an honor to fight someone like Karam. The Blade Spirit warned her not to beg for mercy later, and Sarika simply smiled, claiming she looked forward to it. Before either could make the first move, a voice echoed through the corridor, firm and commanding. It told them both to stop. Everyone froze when they recognized it. The voice of Lord Air. A portal opened in front of them, swirling with black mist, and the command came again. The heir must be sent to the altar immediately. Sarika obeyed without hesitation. Xian, regaining his focus, felt a surge of anticipation. At last, he would meet the one called the God of Darkness, Air himself. Many across the world called the God of the Mist a vile being, one who killed as casually as others ate, masking his atrocities as divine justice. Yet, in his mind, those deaths were acts of righteousness. By dying, the wicked were purified. To most, his reasoning was madness, the logic of a lunatic pretending to protect the powerless. Xian stepped through the portal and emerged before a massive staircase leading to a shadowed throne. From above, a voice asked if he knew who stood before him. Xian answered that it was obvious. Air, the god of the black mist. The being regarded him in silence, then asked if he was Xian Vert, and what right he had to call himself the heir. Xian countered with a question of his own, asking if the god couldn't already sense the mist's power within him. Air explained there were two paths to becoming an heir. Either the mist stone was granted directly by him, or the stone itself chose its successor. Since he had never met Xian, it must have been the latter. The stone had vanished from the altar a year ago. What puzzled him was that Xian had not only awakened its power, but controlled it with unnatural skill for someone his age. Even his eyes looked too old for his body. That meant only one thing. Xian came from a timeline beyond his understanding. Xian found that curious, saying he had assumed the god knew everything. Air replied that if he sought an omnipotent being, he had come to the wrong place. He had long been stripped of his divine status. Xian had suspected as much. Still, Air frowned, noting how unusually easy all this felt. Xian asked what he meant, and the god admitted that he had simply been sitting here, waiting in silence, and now, his heir had finally appeared. Why was Xian doing all of this in his place? And worse, why had he brought something so unpleasant with him? The god of the mist could hardly believe that this boy, unsatisfied with wielding the demonic blade, would dare covet the sacred spear's power as well. Xian only smiled, claiming he had no interest in such a thing. If the artifact was never used, then it was nothing more than trash collecting dust. The god rose from his throne, calling the boy's attitude peculiar, but said the proper rituals still needed to be done. Raising his hand, he declared that Xian would now become the absolute creator, the heir who would inherit his power. Then he asked if Xian truly desired that title. In his previous life, Xian remembered answering that he wanted to live for his older brother. That had been pure foolishness. The god hadn't even cared for his answer back then. When Xian disappeared, the realm collapsed. He'd wondered whether they had ever wanted something from him at all. The god had said there were things far more important than misguided convictions. Now Xian realized the deity might have foreseen everything. He stepped closer, saying he no longer held any faith or ideals. The god looked puzzled, and Xian continued, saying he would use this power in the most selfish way possible, only for himself. The god told him that right and wrong existed only through personal judgment and asked if he wouldn't regret such a choice. He warned the boy to choose his words carefully, or he would strike him down right there. Xian simply replied that he didn't care about the consequences. He would obey no one's commands. Walking his own path was all that mattered. The god noted he seemed to have something planned and asked what it was, but Xian refused to answer. The deity dismissed it, saying the only task that mattered was to cleanse the names he would be given, nothing else. Then, without warning, he appeared behind Karam, saying it was time for a little talk with his daughter. He tugged at her cheeks, teasing that she'd changed, that she had grown quite fond of her master. He tried to shower her with affection, laughing while Karam struggled to push him away. Furious, he continued trying to smother her with his so-called fatherly love while she called out desperately for Xian, who stood there pretending not to see a thing. The god leaned closer, ready to kiss her cheek, when suddenly a glowing pentagram flared between them. The air rippled with energy, magic circles spinning in rapid succession. Karam stumbled back, confused, asking what was happening as her form began to solidify. She looked at her hands, real hands, and felt her body pulsing with warmth. For the first time, she could feel weight, breath, and movement. Cian's eyes widened. He hadn't spent a single drop of mana. Karam demanded to know what he had done. He shrugged, saying he had merely shared a little of his power. She grabbed him by the collar, shaking him furiously, while Cian muttered to himself that father and daughter truly were two of a kind. The next morning in the dorms, Brian went to confront Cian about what had happened the night before. Cian brushed it off, saying it was nothing important and not to overthink it. Brian insisted that they couldn't just ignore the situation, his tone tense as the two locked eyes, sparks practically flying between them. Meanwhile, Karam was fuming, demanding to know why Sarika had shown up at the young master's room so early in the day. At this rate, she said, people would start spreading rumors about some forbidden relationship between instructor and student. Sarika, unfazed, claimed she only came to deliver a book to a particularly troublesome student. Karam snapped back that, as a leader, she should act more appropriately. Sarika retorted, asking why the spirit was so obsessed with meddling in things that weren't her concern. Cian stood there silently, caught in the middle, deciding it was best to walk away before he got dragged into their argument. As the two women continued their verbal war, Brian stood frozen, sweating and unsure what to do. Outside, the academy city was alive with noise and movement. Cian sat perched on a stone pillar, quietly observing the crowd below. For a moment, he felt at ease, until the sharp scent of blood reached his nose. Someone crashed to the ground nearby. Sarika was sprawled out, coughing blood, her body twisted from the impact. A few students nearby laughed, saying they should try that thing again. It looked painful, which only made it more entertaining to them. The blonde among them conjured a sphere of mana in his palm, his grin widening. Holding it out in front of her face, he taunted that he had brought something delicious for her. When a friend offers food, he said, "One must eat it." He forced her mouth open, cruelly pressing the glowing orb closer, until a voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Someone ordered him to stop. A student was about to strike another with the mana orb when a girl stepped in, condemning the act as disgraceful for a noble. The blonde turned, annoyed, demanding to know who dared interfere. He introduced himself proudly as Beret Rumil, son of Duke Rumil, then asked who she was supposed to be. The girl met his gaze and calmly introduced herself, Princess Erin Savalro of the Empire. Recognition flickered in his eyes. A smirk spread across his face as he mocked her title, calling her the Empire's famous Fifth Company girl. He stepped close, pretending to bow, saying it was an honor to meet her. Erin ignored his sarcasm, demanding an explanation for the scene she'd just witnessed. He shrugged, saying it was nothing serious, and suggested she ask the boy herself. Turning to the trembling student, he ordered him to speak up. The boy flinched as Erin grabbed him by the collar, asking if he was hurt. He stammered that he was fine, completely fine, in fact. Erin frowned, unconvinced. His clothes were torn, his lip bleeding, and yet he insisted nothing was wrong. He averted his eyes, mumbling that they were only joking around and that she should leave. Beret laughed, mocking her, asking if she'd heard that. "See?" he said with a sneer. "Apparently, I should be the one feeling insulted here." Erin declared she was taking the boy with her, unwilling to leave him in that situation. But before she could move, the blonde student grabbed her wrist, his grip firm and arrogant. She demanded to know what he thought he was doing. He mocked her, reminding her that the boy himself had told her to go away. Erin warned him coldly that he was holding the arm of an imperial princess. The blonde only laughed, saying it didn't matter. She was just the useless fifth princess of the Empire. Cian, who had been nearby, caught every word. His expression darkened as the blonde's arrogance echoed through the courtyard. In that instant, the air shifted. The guy reached for his aster and transformed, mana flaring around him as his posture changed. Erin flushed slightly when she noticed Cian standing there, but his eyes weren't on her. They were fixed on the kid before him, curious and calculating. The name Reshmus crossed his mind, stirring memories buried deep in his past. Two figures clashed in the Empire of Garum, in the stronghold of Fort Klein. Cian remembered that battle clearly. He had fought against her, the most formidable swordswoman of her generation, Reshmus Klein. At first, he'd mistaken her for a man. The revelation had been an unexpected reversal. She wasn't just skilled, she was extraordinary. Originally from the UCF Empire, she had inexplicably joined Garum's dominion after graduating from the academy, even renouncing her nationality. Xian had blocked one of her furious strikes from the throne platform, his body reacting instinctively. She launched another attack, swift and clean, but he vanished and reappeared behind her. His counterstrike landed squarely against her spine, and she collapsed to the ground, motionless. What had looked like training had actually been an assassination ordered by the Empire. The mission was to eliminate her quietly, but she discovered the truth, and the confrontation became an official duel. For him, it hadn't been personal. He had simply admired her strength, someone who reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship without political favor or lineage. Killing her without a fight would have been a waste. Back in the present, Beret's companions shouted his name, while Reshmus, now back in her academy days, stood there dazed and bruised. Beret staggered to his feet, annoyed that others were interfering, ranting that busybodies needed to mind their own affairs. He recognized Xian then, Xian Vert, the young master he'd heard rumors about, the one who had fought on the front lines. He sneered, asking if he wanted to meddle in their fun. Xian didn't think any of this looked fun. Injecting mana orbs into someone's body could destroy their internal flow, permanently crippling their magic. He asked if their game involved forcing mana orbs into people's mouths. A dark grin crossed his face as he summoned a massive orb of black energy, saying he'd join in too. Beret broke into a sweat as the sphere grew larger above Xian's hand. The boy asked mockingly why his mouth wasn't open yet, then casually lowered the enormous orb as if ready to shove it down the blonde's throat. Later, in the dorms, Reshmus lay beaten and bruised on the bed. Marin, sitting beside her, said they had already treated her wounds. She just needed to rest for a while. Reshmus thanked them quietly, saying she could never repay what they'd done for her. Erin, for some reason, felt a surge of pride, smiling as she said that their dear Xian had handled everything, so there was no need to worry anymore. Xian's gaze lingered on Reshmus, noticing the extent of her bruises. It was remarkable that she hadn't fainted despite so many fractures. She truly lived up to the title of the strongest swordsman. Then, out of nowhere, Reshmus asked if he knew her. She hesitated, cheeks slightly red, admitting that she had noticed him looking her way more than once. Kian explained that he had mistaken her for someone else and told her to forget about it, apologizing if he had made her uncomfortable. Erin stood to the side, listening carefully, her eyes darting between them. Reshmus brushed it off, saying it was fine, though a hint of embarrassment colored her voice. Suddenly, Erin asked where Reshmus was staying, and what she would do if those same bullies came after her again. Reshmus replied that she lived in the common dorms. Erin tilted her head and asked if she had any noble background. Reshmus said no, she'd only been accepted through special admission, thanks to instructor Veltane's recommendation. But when she arrived, the instructor had already been expelled. Xian understood immediately. She had lost her only support within the academy. What she had endured so far was likely just the beginning. Soon, she might even be expelled. Erin's expression softened with pity, and Kian turned to her, suggesting she take Reshmus in as an attendant. That way, the girl could learn swordsmanship while staying close to her. Erin blinked, confused, asking why he was calling him a girl. Couldn't he see it was clearly a boy? Xian simply said she was mistaken. Reshmus was a girl. Erin froze. Her entire world cracked for a second. From behind, Reshmus awkwardly apologized, explaining that she hadn't meant to deceive anyone. She'd just preferred short hair since childhood, which often caused misunderstandings. Xian could only think that fate seemed to love reversals. First, there had been a boy mistaken for a girl in the demon's domain, and now it was the opposite. Erin started crying, apologizing for not realizing sooner, and admitting she couldn't understand how Xian had known. Reshmus smiled faintly, saying it was all right, that she wasn't offended. Erin then asked what she thought about Kian's idea. To her, it sounded perfect. If Reshmus became her attendant, she wouldn't have to fear harassment anymore. She could focus on her studies and live comfortably. Reshmus asked what she could possibly offer in return. Erin confessed that she'd been feeling lonely and needed someone by her side. Grateful, Reshmus bowed slightly and promised to serve as her attendant from now on, never bringing her shame. Erin turned around, ready to thank Xian for the idea, but he was already gone. He'd slipped away quietly, knowing the two could handle things from there. As he walked through the corridor, he finally understood why Reshmus had left the UCF Empire. She likely wouldn't have lost control of her mana if not for that idiot Beret. Now, the one who had already been the most powerful swordsman on the continent would have her mana fully restored. She would likely become someone even he would struggle to defeat. But that didn't matter. His attention was fixed on something else. It was the thing Sarika had personally handed him earlier that morning, his first mission, his first real assignment for the association.